Here we go. Here we go. I'm David Feldman, and this is the mop-up. Twitter servers crashed on Wednesday for 2 hours. Nobody could access the social media giant. Twitter knew something was terribly wrong when women, people of color, and members of the LGBTQ community all over the world felt safe. According to the newly released transcripts from the January 6th committee, in the final days of the Trump administration, Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's chief of staff, burnt government documents in his office fireplace. Surprised he found any, with Trump using them all as toilet paper. It's a little 2-year-old kid. Trump was flushing government documents down the toilet. I did that when I was 2. More lies from newly elected Republican Congressman George Santos of New York. Turns out his mother didn't die on 9/11. He didn't attend Horace Mann, the elite New York private school. He didn't graduate from college. He didn't work for Citigroup, didn't attend a Goldman Sachs conference and berate the company for not investing in renewable energy. He's not Jewish. His grandmother didn't survive the Holocaust. He never ran an animal charity, never lost an employee at the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. Despite claiming he has a husband, there's no record of his ever being married to a man. Although he can open beer cans by shooting laser beams from his eyes. That is true. I didn't believe it, but I've seen the video, and George Santos can open beer cans by shooting laser beams from his eyes. Federal prosecutors, as well as prosecutors in Long Island, New York, have opened investigations into Santos, while Republicans grapple with the question of whether Santos is unfit to hold elective office or too fit to be only a congressman. I mean, the way this guy plays fast and loose with the truth, I'm surprised the Freedom Caucus isn't trying to run him against Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. Santos is scheduled to be sworn in on Tuesday when the new Republican-controlled 118th Congress convenes. There is talk he could face an ethics investigation. The Republicans are going to be in charge of the House. There will be no ethics investigation because there will be no ethics. Does anyone think they're going to bother with George Santos? The January 6th committee just wrapped up its investigation and recommended that the new House Ethics Committee sanction Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, Kevin McCarthy, Scott Perry, and Andy Biggs for the role they played in trying to overthrow the government of the United States on January 6. And you know that ethics investigation is never going to take place. So does anyone think Republicans are going to go after George Santos for lying about some animal charity he claims he founded? Yes. Yes. Yes and yes. Of course they're going to crucify George Santos. He will be the sacrificial lamb for all the Republican sins. He's the patsy. George Santos is a 34-year-old, deeply troubled con artist who perpetrated a fraud on the American people. And since it's not the kind of fraud that made money for anyone, Republicans will be more than willing to throw him under the bus, assuming George Santos can be replaced by another Republican. They do have a slim majority. They can't lose him. So if they can replace George Santos with a more skilled prevaricator, the GOP will grab the low-hanging fruit, George Santos, and make it look like we Republicans care about restoring trust in our elected officials. Now, I don't have any sympathy for George Santos. I kind of like him in a way. His lies are heroic in their depth and consistency. And maybe I'm wrong, but since he ran as a Republican, isn't conning voters pretty much what he's supposed to do? The whole Republican thing is a con. Their entire platform is built on a con. Lowering taxes for the wealthy stimulates the economy. That's a con. The richest 1% are job creators. Con. The idea that inflation is caused by government spending on a social safety net. That's a con. Medicare is inefficient, and the only way to deliver the best health care to the most people is through private insurance. All one big con job. Guns keep us safe. That's a lie. It's a con. Even Republicans on the social issues, it's all one big con job. They claim to be the party of Christians, but they're so busy turning their backs on the poor and getting rich doing so, Jesus would send them right to hell. It's all a con. They're not against abortion for themselves, at least. They're not against abortion. They don't believe in family values because they have no values. The entire Republican Party is a con. And the bedrock of this con, the Manhattan schist that props it all up, is the lie. The lie. The Washington Post counted nearly 41,000 lies told by Donald Trump during the 4 years he was president. And yes, I know Joe Biden keeps lying about getting arrested trying to meet Nelson Mandela in South Africa. He keeps lying about getting arrested in the 60s at civil rights marches. I know Joe Biden never kept his promise to raise the minimum wage or introduce a public option alongside Obamacare. I get that. But the Democrats do have politicians, senators, and congresspeople who don't lie. The entire Republican Party, on the other hand, is nothing but liars who offer only hatred and greed. They detest government because they despise the American people. But they can't say that, so they lie. The only reason Republicans go to Washington is to lower taxes for the wealthy and destroy the administrative state so nobody in the government will ever cost rich people any money. Republicans pretend to be for things that don't exist, like the family or patriotism or morality. But they believe in none of that. How could you? None of that exists. Their entire existence is built on money and power, and to get all that, they must lie to the American people, each other, and themselves. Their job is to rile people up, get voters angry, get them to hate everyone but the richest 1%. That's the job of Republican. Get people angry at everybody but the richest 1%, distract us all with hatred so the rich can get richer. So yeah, George Santos, he's going down because Republicans need to set an example that nobody is above the law. Congressmen aiding and abetting an insurrection, that we can live with. It's an honest mistake. But George Santos fabricating his past? No, we must set an example. We need to show the American people that nobody is above the law. Unless, of course, you write the law or interpret the law or are expected to enforce the law, in which case none of those laws apply to you. If we learned anything from the January 6 hearings, it's that Republicans will say whatever it takes to remain in power. They claimed fraud at the polls in 2020, but nearly 60 judges asked Donald Trump's lawyers, specifically Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, they were asked for concrete evidence for fraud. And 60 times in 60 trials, Trump's lawyers were unable to provide a single, and I mean a single, shred of evidence of voter fraud. They could not, in a court of law, in 60 courts of law, Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani could not present a single shred of evidence of voter fraud. Not a single shred. From Election Day 2020 until January 6, Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, insisted that the election was stolen by Biden people tampering with Dominion voting machines. Rudy Giuliani claimed foreign governments tampered with Dominion voting machines to get Biden elected. But according to his testimony before the January 6th committee, if you read the transcripts that have just been released, he never believed. He said to the January 6th committee that he never believed for a second that any of that was true. Rudy Giuliani admitted to the January 6th committee that he says things outside a courtroom that he would never say in a court of law. On the steps outside of the courtroom, he would lie to the media. But when pressed by a judge or by the January 6th committee, he would admit he didn't believe a single word he was saying on Fox News or during his press conferences. According to the January 6th report, Rudy Giuliani said he did not believe that Dominion voting machines stole the election for Joe Biden. He also testified that there was no evidence, not a single shred of evidence, that foreign countries had interfered in the election or manipulated votes. But that didn't stop him from holding press conference after press conference, going on Fox News, going on his radio show, and spreading these lies, which he continues to do to this day. As long as you don't make him swear on a Bible, he will lie about the election of 2020. Sidney Powell, Trump's lead attorney on the voter fraud case in 2020, she was the one who pushed hardest on the idea that Dominion tampered with their voting machines in 2020 to push Biden over the top. She, like Giuliani, was unable to provide a single shred of evidence or an expert that could even suggest that the voting machines had been tampered with. Now, Dominion is suing Sidney Powell, as well as Fox News, and Rudy Giuliani for defamation. And in sworn testimony, Sidney Powell said, and I quote, she was deposed for this defamation case. She's the one who came up with the idea that Dominion voting machines had been hacked for Biden. During her deposition, she said, and I quote, no reasonable person would conclude that my statements were truly statements of fact. Under oath, they say something different. Sidney Powell said, under oath, no reasonable person would conclude that my statements were truly statements of fact. So why the press conferences? Why say it over and over? To convince the mob it's true. Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani weren't playing to the judges, to the courtrooms. They were playing to the court of public opinion. They were trying to incite the mob. And the mob still believes this to be true. They still believe the election was stolen. And no amount of court testimony where Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani admit that they lied about the election, no amount of testimony before the January 6th committee where they admit that they lied to the mob about the 2020 election, no amount of testimony is going to change the mob's mind. And that's exactly how January 6th happened. Rudy Giuliani, alcoholic. Rudy Giuliani, did I mention he's an alcoholic? Rudy Giuliani, a broken down alcoholic, didn't care about our courts. He was Trump's lead attorney after the election, right? He did not care about the courts. He was always playing to the mob outside the courtroom. It's why on January 6th, after 60 judges threw his cases out, on January 6th, speaking to the mob on the ellipse, he shouted, and I quote, "Let's have trial by combat. Let's have trial by combat." Because he knew there would never be a real trial. Every single trial he brought was thrown out of court. So he screamed, "Let's have trial by combat." He knew what he was doing. Sidney Powell knew what she was doing. Donald Trump knew what he was doing. They were inciting a mob to take control of the Capitol. They weren't depending on our courts or our laws. They were depending on the mob. On the mob. That's what they do. And you lie to the mob. You tell the mob to believe whatever you want the mob to believe. Something happened. Maybe when they got rid of the fairness doctrine, but something happened where facts no longer matter. Where there are lies, democracy dies. Where there are lies, democracy dies. In America, we have two versions of what happened. We have the truth and the Republican Party's side of the story. But thankfully, it's still against the law to lie under oath. And witnesses who swear on the Bible have two choices here in America: either tell the truth or plead the fifth. Rudy Giuliani told the truth under oath. Rudy tells the truth. Sidney Powell, under oath, told the truth. And believe it or not, Sean Hannity finally told the truth. We had to swear him in on the Bible, but he finally got around to telling the truth. He had to testify. He was deposed. Sean Hannity and his cohorts over at Fox News are getting sued for $1.6 billion by Dominion Voting Systems for defamation. This is going to be a big trial. And they cleaned house before the trial started. Like Lou Dobbs, who was really pushing the Dominion voting machines lie on Fox, he got canned. This is a big case. This case is as big as the Roger Ailes rape accusations that turned out to be true. I mean, let's not forget, Fox News was run by Roger Ailes, invented by Roger Ailes, who was a rapist. So there is this $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit that's proceeding against Fox News. The trial starts, I think, in March, April of next year, and right now is the discovery phase of this lawsuit. A lawsuit which contends that Fox News, its on-air personalities and top executives, knowingly spread lies that Dominion's voting machines had been altered to throw the 2020 presidential election for Joe Biden. Again, this trial is in its preliminary stages, but new testimony from Sean Hannity's deposition has been leaked, and it's not good. Not good for Sean Hannity, not good for Fox News. Hannity, until the defamation suit had been filed, Hannity would often ask how Democrats got away with silencing all those supposed Election Day whistleblowers who could expose the role that Dominion voting machines played in throwing the election for Joe Biden. This was something Sean Hannity kept repeating over and over again. That is why viewers of Fox News take it as received wisdom that Democrats, using Dominion voting machines, were able to fix the election. It's all a lie, repeated incessantly by Fox News, by Sean Hannity. They repeated this lie despite almost 60 lawsuits challenging the election returns, 60 lawsuits filed by Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, 60 lawsuits in the lead up to January 6th getting thrown out of court. They were thrown out of court because there's not a single shred of evidence that there were any voting inconsistencies in any state, which is why one of the ringleaders of the Stop the Steal conspiracy, Rudy Giuliani, is facing disbarment proceedings in Washington, D.C. He's lost his law license. It's been suspended in New York City. It's why Sidney Powell, the other ringleader of the Stop the Steal conspiracy, is also facing sanctions and disbarment from the Texas bar. But you wouldn't know any of this if you were watching Fox News. During testimony leaked last week, Sean Hannity, we've learned during testimony in the Dominion voting machine defamation suit, Hannity was asked point blank if he believed what he said. Did you or did you not believe that the Democratic Party was silencing whistleblowers who could expose Dominion voting machine irregularities that favored Joe Biden? Did you believe that? Under oath, Sean Hannity answered, and I quote, "I did not believe it for 1 second," unquote. Sean Hannity was asked, you kept repeating that Dominion voting machines had been hacked to favor Joe Biden. Did you believe that? And Sean Hannity answered, quote, "I did not believe it for 1 second." Be nice to have Fox News anchors deliver the news under oath, wouldn't it? I think it would look a little different. I think it would be a little different. There is the truth, and then there is what is said on conservative media like Fox News. Lawyers for Dominion voting machines are making the case publicly that depositions taken from Fox News employees like Tucker Carlson, these depositions reveal that practically nobody working for Fox News ever believed voting machines had been hacked in 2020. And yet, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, along with several other high-profile Fox News personalities, continued, up until litigation began, to repeat this baseless claim as fact. Lawyers for Dominion voting are now saying that when asked under oath, not a single Fox News employee could present a single shred of evidence that the Dominion voting machines had been hacked or that votes had been altered in any way to favor Joe Biden. And yet Fox News continued to repeat that lie over and over and over, right up until the defamation lawsuit was filed. Which is why, according to the Poynter Institute, poll after poll shows that to this day, nearly 70% of all Republican voters still believe Joe Biden is an illegitimate president who who stole the presidency from Donald Trump. And bold lies result in bold acts, like storming the Capitol on January 6th. And that was the entire purpose. That was the entire purpose of those lies. They knew those lies would never hold up in court. Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, they knew, but they knew it would animate the mob. Dominion is suing Fox for defamation. They're suing Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell for defamation. But the big lie that the election was stolen is still very much alive. And as we read and digest the January 6th committee's official 8-chapter report on what really happened leading up and during the insurrection, leading up to and during the insurrection, we are learning just how close America came on January 6th to witnessing a bloodbath, a real bloodbath, a bloodbath that Donald Trump not only orchestrated starting before the election, a bloodbath that he was disappointed didn't go far enough. And it was all lies that they knew were lies. Everyone was in on it. Everyone was in on it. They all lied to the mob. More lies than George Santos could have ever imagined, and way more dangerous lies. Trump, Fox News, Sean Hannity, and pretty much the entire Republican Party lies with abandon because they assume they will never get caught. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows had an assistant whose name is Cassidy Hutchinson. And when she was brought before the January 6th committee, she, unlike Mark Meadows, had the courage to obey the subpoena. CNN reports, I'm sure you all have read this, that Cassidy Hutchinson was initially provided an attorney by Donald Trump. That attorney's name is Stefan Passantino, who previously worked in the Trump administration as their ethics attorney. Ethics. CNN is reporting, and I'm sure you've all read this, that Stefan Passantino, the lawyer provided by Donald Trump before Cassidy Hutchinson was going to testify before the January 6th committee, lawyer Stefan Passantino advised Cassidy Hutchinson to lie before the January 6th committee, say things like, I can't recall. I saw things, but I can't remember. This was the free legal advice Donald Trump down in Mar-a-Lago was providing to his former employees. This was the free lawyer that he offered to Cassidy Hutchinson. By the way, those lawyers that Donald Trump provides, they're all paid for by his super PACs. When you donate to a Trump super PAC, you are essentially paying his legal fees as well as legal fees for any Trump subordinate who will refuse to cooperate with the January 6th committee or the Justice Department. Okay? Now, in the committee's final report, they say their work was hindered by the Trump administration illegally engaging in witness tampering. This is beyond anything we saw during Watergate. Before testifying before the January 6th committee, multiple witnesses said they received calls from Trump and his associates advising them to remain silent. This is Gambino family stuff. The report says the Justice Department is now aware of Donald Trump's attempts to tamper with witnesses' testimony. There are roughly 2.5 million Americans behind bars tonight. Most of them never had a trial. Most of them are poor. And so they plead guilty for a lighter sentence. They don't get a trial. The wrong people are in jail tonight. I'm pretty certain we could empty out pretty much all of our prisons and safely fill them with the real criminals, not the stick-up artists on the street, but the people who mug us every day on Wall Street, stealing our jobs, our pensions, our homes, our health care, our education, and our democracy. We need to lock up the people who own our judges, our Justice Department, our government, and both political parties. George Santos isn't the liar. He's not the scandal. The scandal is Donald Trump still walking free. Why? I'm David Feldman. Remember to stay strong and protect the weak.